Rick Melnick tiene más de 25 años de experiencia en el comercio mundial de insumos para la agricultura, especialmente en biopesticidas, fitosanidad, marketing. Comenzó en esta industria en 1995 como editor de Meister Media Worldwide, donde llegó a ser director editorial corporativo. Estando ahí fue nombrado miembro del directorio de la BPIA, la Biological Products Industry Alliance, en el 2008. Esta es la industria de los productos biológicos de Estados Unidos. Fue chairman del directorio de la BPIA el 2013 y estuvo en ese cargo hasta el 2019. A través de la BPIA fue miembro de la fundación de Bioprotection Global, que es la macroorganización mundial que reúne a las diferentes asociaciones de bioinsumos, biocontrol. Trabajó también en el 2011 en Valent Bioscience. Se incorporaba en Bioscience en el 2011 como director de branding y comunicaciones, desarrollando ahí grandes iniciativas. Los que conocemos esa empresa sabemos todos los aportes que ha hecho a esta industria. Y en el 2019, Rick, con su larga experiencia, se une a Dunham Trimmer como vicepresidente de negocios globales. Dunham Trimmer es probablemente la mejor y mayor consultora de bioinsumos, biocontrol y biopesticidas del mundo. Grandes amigos nuestros, y les damos una súper bienvenida. Rick nos va a hablar sobre tendencias globales en biocontrol. Rick, mucho gusto.
Thank you. Nice to meet you, Patricio.
That was a long introduction.
Oh, you're very kind. Thank you very much. Shall I share my screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Can you see okay?
Yes.
It's on its way.
Have you got it?
Yes, Rick, you can start.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much, Patricio, for the kind introduction. Very much appreciate being asked to speak at this event for Red Agricola. I'd like to thank all of the attendees that are here today. It's a very interesting segment to be in. I very much enjoy talking about it. So I'd like to talk to you today about what we would consider the top 10 trends in biocontrol. I do have some animation in my presentation, so I'm not sure about the lag time. So I will take a few moments on my clicks to make sure that they come through. So first, I wanted to introduce you to the Dunham Trimmer team. So these are my partners and I. This is me. As you can see from my hair, this is my first communion picture. So that was taken a while ago, but there are four of us. Mark was one of our founders. He's located here in the US. He's in Florida. I live in the Chicago area. And then we have our biostimulant expert, Manel Severa, who is in Barcelona. And then our good friend and partner, Massimo Toni, who is our business development partner. He lives in Geneva, Switzerland. So what is it that we do? We have an extensive client base in the biocontrol space. I think our client list is a who's who of companies. We represent or have represented at one time just about all of the large multinational companies. We do a lot of work with startup companies who are looking for help connecting with the channel or maybe selling their technology. Also medium companies, and we have biocontrol here. We also, we mean biostimulants by that. We actually work with investment firms quite often. We do a lot of due diligence for companies that are either looking to fill a gap and looking for candidates to acquire companies or products, but also the investment houses. We do a lot of work for them. Biofertilizers and fertilizer companies, we certainly work closely with them. Regionally, we work in all regions. We have a network of subcontractors that we use for our research, and US, North America, Latin America, Europe, and Asia. We work in all of those. And then we also work with companies that supply services to the biocontrol industry. So we work with labs, we may work with some tool manufacturers and things like that. So really we cover all the bases, and there's a lot of surprises, and we learn new things every day. This is what we would call our umbrella chart. So we want to start by defining what it is that we're talking about when we talk about biologicals. And we're asked permission to use this chart quite a bit because it does very nicely categorize the biological products industry as a whole. So today we're going to be focusing over here. My partner Manel, I believe a few months ago, gave a presentation here in trends in biostimulants. So we're going to be talking here in the biocontrol market. I will be talking, however, about the category a little bit more broadly at certain points in the presentation where it's relevant. So where it's relevant, I think we could start with the first trend. And you know, I'm not going to be giving a lot of numbers in this presentation. I know how much everyone loves to see charts and graphs and endless PowerPoint presentations. I'd like to talk to you today a little bit more conceptually on some of these topics, but I will share this one because I think it is relevant. So this is a chart that shows our industry as a whole. And so we have three lines here. This top one is biocontrol. Then we have a biostimulant line and biofertilizer, which I'll talk about in just a moment. So this chart is where we're typically conducting our analyses currently between the years 2015 and going out now to 2027. You'll see biocontrol remains the largest segment of the biological sector, and the growth is very strong. Still, we're anticipating a CAGR of about 15% over this time period, but that slope is still increasing and will increase over the next several years. Biostimulant growth is steady, still double-digit growth, so you see that here. And we may be underestimating biostimulants a little bit here, but it's getting a lot of traction, particularly here in the US. There's been a lot of adoption recently. I'll talk a little bit about that. When we last updated this chart, we had just begun work on a new global market report. I should have mentioned that one of the things that we do is we have global market reports for each of these segments. And we've just had our first production meeting for this biofertilizer report, which we anticipate will be coming out in January. And here again, these numbers might be a little bit low. There's a lot of interest around carbon sequestration and products like that. And so I'll have some more information next time we speak on the size of the biofertilizer market. So we're about here. We're right now around $5 billion overall for the industry. And so what's behind this growth? To what can we attribute it? I know we have a diverse audience today. So hopefully we have some growers. We're sure that we have some channel partners, some distributors, sponsoring manufacturers and so forth. Maybe we have some regulators and policymakers too. That would be great. So what's behind this growth? Well, at all levels and on all of the markets, there is government policy favoring sustainability. So obviously this demand is being created at the consumer level. Government policy tends to respond pretty quickly to what its constituents are asking for. So now there are policies that are favoring activities that support sustainability, and biological products fit right into that. But for biocontrols specifically, consumers are demanding residue-free produce. The organic industry would be the most extreme example of that, but you know, consumers want sustainably grown food. You probably heard that quite a bit. Growers have, their demand is that they want high quality, and that's something that's never going to change. They're always looking for quality, but they're looking for quality to meet the demands of these consumers, and particularly in your region, in Peru and Chile, Colombia, you're growing for export in a lot of cases, and so you know very well that residues are also a huge issue for growers. They're meeting the demand. Resistance management is another key attribute of biologicals, and preserving the new chemicals that come out of the chemical industry. Biologicals are a way that growers can do that if they're growing in an integrated system. On the biostimulant side, consumers are demanding sustainability again. Consumers are demanding high quality, but they're also demanding year-round supply. So I know here in the States, we want to be able to go to the grocery store and buy peaches or avocados at any time of the year. And so biopesticides, biostimulants, biofertilizers can play a key role in allowing for year-round supply. Biostimulants also play a critical role for the mitigation of abiotic stress. And with climate change, that need is becoming even more pronounced. As we look to the LATAM region specifically, we don't have the numbers in here, but in a relative sense, you can see that in each of these important markets, we've shown 3 countries here that we think are representative, and then we have the rest of Latin America here. In all cases, the biocontrol market is more than doubling from the period 2020 to 2025. In our last biocontrol report, we had identified that Latin America is actually the fastest growing region in the world. Not yet the size of Europe and the US, but very quickly gaining on those regions. But the growth has certainly surpassed those markets, which are becoming a little bit more mature. And we see that playing out now as our last report came out in 2018. We're working on a new one for 2022. So again, we're talking to the right folks here with this presentation. These are very strong markets for biocontrols. If we look at this another way, so Patricio mentioned I was the chairman of the board for BPIA, which is our trade association here, and I was the chairman in this area right around here. So I think another good way to look at the growth of the industry is how many participants are there in the trade associations that represent that. So we're very proud within BPIA of this graph. I joined BPIA right around in this area here. My first BPIA meeting, we literally all sat at the same table at UC Davis. There were about 12 people there. But now we have 144 members. We have more than doubled in size over the last 10 years. This period right here, this is when there were some major acquisitions. AgriQuest was acquired by Bayer. Becker Underwood was acquired in this time period for some significant amounts. And so you see the interest from the industry kind of took off at that point. But we'll come back to this at the end of the presentation, because I think this line here is representative of even some greater things. So second trend, the investment in the bio space remains very strong. So we have a monthly newsletter that we do with our partners Informa and Newegg International, which I'm sure that you know. And we report basically on these deals over time. We do track them. We're tracking 2021, and I can tell you that 2021 looks like it's going to surpass 2020. But we have this broken down by, this blue color here, these are investment related deals. And the orange line here, these are deals related to distribution agreements. And then we have manufacturing R&D agreements up here in green. So you'll see a transition early on where the investment earlier in this last 10-year cycle, the investments were agreements were a greater part of the dynamic. But over time, these distribution and R&D manufacturing agreements are becoming a larger part. And that's kind of the natural evolution of things, right? So we have an average over this time period of 57 deals a year, which is quite strong. But you'll see here, we're out here somewhere, but we're beating that average, pretty significantly 3 of the last 4 years. So this average is going to continue to go up. I will say that I mentioned we're a little bit closer to maturity on the biocontrol side. We still have a lot of growth to go. If we looked at this same chart and limited it only to biostimulants, you'd see an even more dramatic slope here in the more recent past, because the more consolidation, the activity is happening very quickly in the biostimulant industry as that industry grows and adoption and knowledge is settling in at the grower level. So we saw a little bit of a dip here, and that's due to COVID. Big surprise. The deals slowed down a little bit. Travel shut down. It was just harder to get out. Business development people, they like to shake hands. They like to spend time in conference rooms, and that in-person stuff just wasn't able to happen. Market fragmentation and resources, market access limitations, those have all driven consolidation. Those are just natural business processes. So we are still in the period of consolidation within our industry. It's much more fragmented than in the conventional side, where now what do we have? 3 or 4 major chemical companies. When I started in 1995, I think we would have said there were about 20. But it's not like that in the biocontrol space. There is no ultra dominant company there, like there is in the conventional side. But over time, we'll see what happens. The biostimulant sector, as I mentioned, is currently leading in this M&A activity. So if we had broken this out differently by biocontrol, biostimulants, you'd see the greater share of deals in the biostimulant space. So I mentioned COVID. So certainly I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the impact of COVID as one of the global trends. So in 2020, we talk to many companies every week, every month, and we always talk about this in our conversations. How has this impacted you? I think our initial estimates were that the market declined in 2020 by between 2% and 4%, but we're starting to think now that we might have overstated that. I think we adapted very well. I mean, people have to eat, so agriculture is not going to shut down because of the pandemic. Business with existing customers, we adapted very quickly by using Zoom, by using Teams. I see Red Agricola has adapted pretty quickly here. So this is a new way of doing business, and it's not going to go away. We all participate in these kinds of meetings all day long. So that was, if there was one positive, maybe, we learned to adapt and do business in a new way that we didn't before. But acquisition of new customers was a little bit more challenging. That's where the in-person communication is more important. Weren't able to travel, weren't able to build those relationships in person, which is a lot easier than building relationships virtually. So our initial indications for 2021 was that we were back on track to pre-COVID levels with growth. In the past several months, though, I'm sure that you've all seen or experienced there are challenges with supply chain, which have kind of escalated over time. So what's behind that? When the pandemic hit, one of the natural responses was people were in wait and see mode, and that was from the grower level through the channel. And so people didn't want to carry a lot of inventory. There was a lot of uncertainty, and they weren't sure what was going to happen. So rather than ordering in advance, there was a lot of just-in-time ordering that began to take place. And over time, that effect of that has accrued, and now we're seeing significant problems with supply chain. Costs are going up, as I'm sure that many of you have experienced. And so we're still in the midst of that now, and that's quite prevalent within our industry. This is one I'm very excited to talk about. Trend number 4, disruptive pheromone technology. This is the cover of our most recent market report, which just published on September the 1st. We worked on it for more than a year. It is an excellent report. If I do say so myself, it's about almost 400 pages. But this relates specifically to the opportunities here, relates specifically to Latin America. So if you've used pheromones in the past, if you're a grower, you probably know that historically pheromones have been kind of reserved for high value crops, most prominently trees and vines. And that's because manufacturing pheromones is not cheap. So these are not commodity products. They cost a lot to produce. There's a lot of high technology involved in producing pheromones, and thus there haven't been a lot of opportunities for pheromones to penetrate the row crop and cereal markets simply because of the cost of goods sold, and the return on investment just hasn't been there. But that is now changing. And again, this relates specifically to Latin America. So I don't know if you've heard about synthetic biology or not, but synthetic biology in manufacturing in pheromones is what we would consider a game-changing development. There are a few companies in particular that have developed this technology. And so basically they are using yeasts to manufacture the active ingredients as metabolites. And now this is bringing the cost of pheromone manufacturing down dramatically, by a factor of 10 or more in many cases. And so what this means is that there are now opportunities for a much lower cost product to make its way into row crops and other broadacre crops. So this has immediate impact in crops like rice, also maize, soybean, and cotton, and particularly in Latin America. This trend is only going to increase over time. These developments are still in their infancy. The companies that have developed these technologies, they don't really have the partners yet to deliver the products at the grower level, but we already see those relationships being forged. And I think this is something that you can count on. So I mentioned, we don't show a lot of charts necessarily in our presentations, all of our data. I mean, that's our business. That's kind of our assets, but we do like to show some highlights. So here's Latin America here. So I'm looking at over time, what's the CAGR in the row crop market. And then we have this is typical of our report. So we have North America, we have US, Canada here, Latin America, Europe, Asia Pacific, and the rest of the world. And then we have the total here. So this bubble chart, we call it, here again, Latin America. So the color of the dot, color of the bubble here, this would be the period from 20 to 25. I'm sorry, this would be 15 to 20. The orange is the period from 20 to 25. And then this gray bubble would be the entire period of the report, 15 to 25. So the relative location on the y-axis shows what the CAGR was at that point in time. The size of the bubble is equivalent to the size of the market. So if we look at Latin America here, we can see the pheromones market between 2015, 2020, a huge CAGR, 1,200% CAGR, but the size of the market is very small. Here's where we are now. And so you can see, even though it's not a huge market, it's the CAGR of between 2020 and 25, 75% is pretty dramatic. And here's where we're going to end up. So this is the size of the market by 2025 is quite significant. And again, over time, this is only going to increase. So if you're a supplier and if you're selling into the row crop markets in Latin America, certainly you would want to be thoughtful of this and build this into your planning. If you're interested in the report, you can always reach out to me. We also have biostimulant and biocontrol reports. We'll be happy to talk to you about that. So what pests are we talking about? Pink bollworm in the cotton market, that used to be the biggest market, perhaps besides codling moth, but in the pheromone market, the bollworm market was huge until the GM crops came out and the plant incorporated pesticides kind of took that market away. But now we've seen the onset of resistance to the cry proteins in some of the GM crops. And also there are some markets where that technology was accepted or not accepted. And so that market is coming back. So we do see some significant adoption of pheromones in the cotton market, or readoption perhaps is better stated, over the next several years, particularly in the Far East and Latin America. Fall armyworm is another one. Same thing, we have GM crops that are GM traits that are not performing as they had in the past. I think the industry is trying to catch up. The traits industry is doing a nice job catching up, but if there's a low, even GMC is not cheap, as you know. So now there's more competition to be had with pheromones, where if they can bring the cost down, they can enter into these markets. So again, we see a lot of this growth that you're seeing here relates to maize and also cotton. So those are the good things on growth, but there are still growth barriers in place. And if you've been in this industry for a while, you won't be surprised by these. If you're kind of new, can tell you that we're looking at seeing we're seeing the maturity approaching. By 2030 or so, we anticipate that the high value crop market is going to start to mature. So we're not going to be seeing these dramatic double-digit growth areas in biocontrols beyond that. At least that's our current expectation. But there are two areas that are necessary for continued long-term growth in biologicals. These are the two areas where if we can break through, then there will be dramatic growth, but we're still not seeing those dynamics. So in row crops, what are the barriers? Well, the barriers are crop prices. Crop prices for maize are not the same as table grapes, certainly. The number of applications that growers make in row crops is smaller, and so sometimes some of the biocontrols they might require more frequent application, but basically this is a return on investment dynamic. So until it makes economic sense for the application of biocontrols into these crops, growers aren't going to adopt them. It's just simple economics. On the bioherbicide side, for a herbicide to be successful, lots of them need to be broad spectrum, but they also need residual activity, because again, they're not going into the field and making numerous applications. They need to put something down and trust that it will control their pests over time. Biologicals don't really have that attribute. So biologicals, their residual is typically limited. That's one of the benefits that they have. They don't persist in the environment. So in one perspective, that's a positive. We've heard about bioherbicides. There's been a lot of work on them over time, but we really don't have anything in the market yet. And these barriers still remain. So there are continued opportunities, certainly for growth in the high value crops, but not as much in these areas. And this is the breakthrough that hopefully one day will put us over the top. This is a slower trend, but it's one that we thought was important to include in our presentation. So the introduction of hybrid products. So these are three products that you may know. Registrations vary where they're registered, but Pancho Votivo has been around now for about 10 years. That is a combination of clothianidin and Bacillus firmus, and that's a seed treatment, and I'm sure you've heard of that. Probably 5 or 6 years ago, FMC came out with this combination or hybrid product. Again, an insecticide fungicide that combines bifenthrin and Bacillus amylochiafaciens. And more recently now, we have Regev, which is a fungicide that combines tea tree oil and difenoconazole. And so all three of these products, I mean, the combination, it makes sense for various reasons. And I think it's interesting to see that here we have the conventional plus the biological. And then in this most recent case, we have the biological plus the conventional. So what these products do is that they're leveraging the benefits of both the conventional and the biological to deliver the best solution according to the company for the grower. So it makes sense. Why do we not see more of these products? Well, clearly the limiting factor is compatibility. So here we have living organisms or metabolites from living organisms with a conventional. Here we have a plant extract, but these two components have to work together. So the conventional cannot undermine the activity of the biological, and certainly the biological cannot undermine the activity of the conventional, or the product's not going to sell, that no one's going to want to sell it, no one's going to want to buy it. So, but this, it makes sense that we combine products, and there's a lot of work with that. We know and understand there's a lot of work being done in this area to bring the two segments together. So we would anticipate over time this accelerating, and we'll be seeing more and more of these. So I want to take a quick moment here just to break in our trends and talk about stakeholder groups within the value chain. The next few trends that I have to share with you relate directly to this. So let's just run through here. So we have the manufacturers in our space. And so we used to have just folks that only made biological products, but now we have many, many companies entering the market that are at their core, they're conventional companies, but they are now manufacturing biological products either through acquisitions or they've developed their own technology. So now it's much more common to see a company that is selling both of these. So when they go to market, these companies are using researchers, they can be using academia, they can be using private researchers. They also have consultants. And so one of their pathways to market is to have trials done with their product, and then they depend heavily upon these researchers and consultants to take that message down into the channel and ultimately the growers down here. So this is one important pathway. A lot of these companies, they already have established the relationship with the channel, and so they can go directly down to this line where we have, pardon me, the seed companies, we have the distributors, then we have some independent dealers, and ultimately the products make their way through here and on to the grower. Some even have they sell direct to growers, but all of these stakeholder groups are involved. Now we're getting down and we're on our way to the consumer on this path. So we come down here, and before we get there, we have to go through the government. So we have regulators and policymakers who are responding both ways to their constituents, and they're making the policy and the regulations that will govern how these products are used, making sure that they're safe, making sure the application rates and in some countries efficacy is a requirement, some it's not, but they're kind of the gatekeepers between these two segments. Once we get past the regulatory level, then we're free to go to food companies, ultimately food retailers, and then on into the consumers. So these stakeholder groups also have an impact. So we have, you might have an organic wine company or an organic berry producer or a broker, and they're working with the grocery stores and onto the consumer. So here again, an interesting dynamic. We have organics at one end of the spectrum when we're marketing the absence of chemicals, I guess is a good way to put it. What we don't see so much is the marketing of, there's some sustainably grown marketing messages, but typically the food retailer, they'll talk about the absence of chemicals in one section of the store, but they don't necessarily want to talk about this is the hybrid grown, because that implies there is some chemical involved. So I think most of the people here in this audience accept that chemicals are regulated very strictly. They don't pose risk. Not everybody would agree with that. But again, the food retailer, they don't want to talk about that. They want to show nice, big, juicy table grapes and beautiful apples and bursting red tomatoes, and that's what they want the consumer to see. And so again, all of these stakeholders are important to our industry. So for you to succeed, for us to succeed as an industry, we need to address and message to the needs of each of these stakeholder groups. So I'll talk a little bit more about this on my last slide, but you know, we're market analysts, and we help companies with a lot of strategy and so forth. And so certainly there's the end user, there's the grower, but if you ask a manufacturer, well, who's your customer? In fact, that's usually one of the first questions I ask a new or prospective client. Who do you consider to be your customer? And the answers vary. So many companies consider this to be their customer because this is who they invoice, and then this is who pays them. But other companies consider the grower to be their customer. And yes, their product is passing through these levels or links in the channel, but they think about the growers as being their customer. Neither answer is right or wrong necessarily, but it demonstrates that there are key links in the chain that need to be addressed. Same here. If you are speaking to someone who's a regulator or a policymaker, your message about biologicals has to be a little bit different than it is here. Your message for a distributor is, how is this biological product going to help you grow your business? How is this biological product going to help to make you money? How is this biological product helping you meet the need of your customer? Those are different discussions than for a regulator. How is this biological product going to help you meet the demands of your administration? How is this biological product going to help you have a sustainable output as a nation? How is a biological product going to help the food supply for your constituents? These are very different messages. They're all relevant, but they are different messages for different people in the value chain, for different stakeholder groups. And I'm going to encourage everyone who's on this call, wherever you are in here, to be thoughtful of that and think about the interrelationship and between these links in the chain, and not only focus on you and the links directly to each side of you. The opportunities really lie in the broader scheme of things. So this is probably a little bit unusual for most people. I could really talk here comparatively between any of those links in the chain, or even you know, kinds of differences in a single link. So, but this talk today is about global trends. And so this is certainly a global trend, and it's relevant, but it affords us the opportunity to talk a little bit more about what the attributes are of biological products, and to just see what I was talking about, what are the differences between stakeholder groups. So let's start with biological product attributes. Pardon me while I take a sip of my coffee here. So these are the attributes from a strategic marketing position that we would typically assign to biologicals. So efficacy, you know, biologicals in many cases don't have the one-to-one level of efficacy, but they meet a threshold. Enhanced crop quality. This is for biopesticides, which would include, I know there's a lot of use of PGRs, particularly in Chile. So in the US, we regulate PGRs as biopesticides, but biopesticides can enhance crop quality tremendously. It can also enhance yield. So here you have the dynamics. Improved yield may be better grade. It doesn't necessarily have to be more weight or more output, but it could be my apples grade better than when I don't use biopesticides. So those are both attributes that we talk about. Residue management is huge in today's global market. So if you're talking about year-round supply, many times growers don't know where their crop is going to go, but they know that when it does go, it's got to be free of residues and manage that Codex chart. Labor and harvest benefits. Labor can be the biggest, in most cases, is the biggest expense that a grower has. So if he can help manage his harvest, if he can help time his harvest using biopesticides, if he can get his workers back into the field more quickly because of the low re-entry intervals. Those are all benefits that a grower is going to realize. Maintaining the beneficial insect population. So part of the biocontrol industry are beneficial insects, which you can purchase from companies that sell insects, but you also may have just natural populations in your field that you want to maintain, because those beneficial insects are going to help keep the levels of pests down. Biopesticides tend to be very specific, and so they can have a positive impact here. Resistance management I mentioned before. So agriculture has a history of wearing out good chemistry. We've seen that over time. I think there are something now like more than 600 arthropods that demonstrate that have some resistant populations to synthetics, and so this is a big problem. By using biopesticides, by incorporating biopesticides into the program, however, you can mitigate this dynamic. Resistance is not as big of a problem. It's absent with many active ingredients because of complex modes of action. So this is certainly something that's important. Environmental safety, I think that's kind of self-evident. And then compatibility in an IPM program. So I mentioned, there are the extreme for there's a grower who's completely relying on chemicals like they used to in 1960. And then there's a grower who's 100% organic. Most growers that are growing organic have some conventional and some organic acreage. So if you have a product that fits in to an integrated system, there's benefits to be had there. So let's talk about the commercial farmer. So this would be the large scale industrial farmer. And where do these attributes fit in? How does he think about how valuable are these? So we use a simple system, just 1, 2, or 3. How valuable is it? So the efficacy of a product to a commercial farmer, obviously, if it doesn't work, it doesn't have any value. So the better it works, the more value it has. This efficacy is critical importance. A farmer wants to sell his crop for the highest amount possible. And so if he can beat his competitors by having a higher quality crop, he's going to be very interested in your product. If you can show him a return on investment, he's going to be very interested in that product. Same thing with yield. If I can get more product out of my 1 acre or 1 hectare by using your product, then I'm certainly going to be interested in it. Residue management, I talked about that. In today's market, this is huge. The codex, the requirements, the residues vary by not only by country, but now by food retailer. So if you're selling into Europe, then you know that some of the food companies or grocery stores or food retailers there, they have residue limits that are more stringent than the government's. So they're using that now as a marketing tool. So this is a huge concern for growers. Same thing with labor. We talked about their most costly line item, and so if you can help them to save on their labor and the availability of labor, here in the U.S. sometimes can be at issue, they're gonna listen to you. Soft on beneficials, this depends. It depends on the grower. I had one grower tell me, I'm in the business of growing oranges, not growing beneficials. So not all growers think the same way here, but it is something to some growers that they think about. Resistance management, again, it varies by the farmer. Would give this a 2 value. Not everybody's concerned about it. Sometimes growers just think the next thing is going to come down the pike and they'll just deal with it as it comes. Environmental safety, I think sometimes growers don't get the benefit here that they deserve. Growers depend on the environment, they depend on their land, and every grower I've known has always been an excellent steward of the land. And so we give that a 3 value. IPM compatibility, again, it depends on the growers. So now let's talk about a small holding farmer. And this is, you may not have heard this in a presentation like this in the past, but it provides us a good opportunity. And this is of growing interest at the global level. How does a small holding farmer look at these same attributes? Certainly the efficacy of whatever bio product he's using are important. Crop quality, it is somewhat important, but oftentimes this farmer is growing food for his family. So the shape of his potato or his tomato is not of the same importance that it is for the commercial grower. Enhanced yield, oftentimes these growers have limited resources, and so they're trying literally to grow food. It would be nice if they could grow more food, but they're not getting a monetary return on their investment. So they're not going to spend more money on these products to boost their yield by several bushels an acre. They're just trying to grow food. So this isn't the most important benefit for them. Nor is resistance management. Again, they're growing food for their family. So we see a disparity here already. Labor and harvest benefits will usually, for these growers, the labor is their family. So they certainly want to have safe products for their family out in the field, but they're not necessarily trying to save money here. So it does have some importance, not a lot. Soft on beneficials, they may rely on beneficials a little bit more than the commercial farmer because they're trying to keep their costs down as much as possible. I mean, everyone is, but for a lot of these folks, they just don't have the money to spend on inputs. So this might be a little bit more important. Resistance management, they're really not thinking about that. They're using what is available. They want things that work and can help them at a manageable cost. Safety is important to them for sure, and probably the same on IPM. They want to integrate things. But these two columns are very different, and the same kinds of benefits, but the perception of them or the weight of each benefit is different. So why am I talking to this group about small holdings farmers? Well, there's a reason why, and for obvious reasons. The interest in small holdings farmers in the private sector is low. Companies aren't marketing to small holdings farmers. The folks on this call, perhaps with a few exceptions, they're thinking about large acreage. Those are potential sales growers that they can market to. A lot of these products are not cheap, so they're not concerned with small holdings farmers. But I will tell you that at a global level, at the FAO level, at the government level, there is interest in bringing biologicals to small holdings farmers for obvious reasons. If we want to be sustainable at a global level, then these folks are stakeholders too. And I think there are opportunities here for companies that might not be readily apparent. So the answer really lies in public and private partnerships. So if we want to reach these small holdings farmers, usually it's going to take some collaboration between the government and industry. Now, I have here bringing biocontrols to small holdings farmers is good for business. Some of you might be laughing or rolling your eyes in the background, but I will maintain that in a long-term view, it is good for business, because the more that we can increase knowledge and awareness of the role of biologicals, and if you have small holdings farmers and you have success stories, those success stories are going to gain visibility because the people in power with governments are going to be standing up or speaking to you in presentations like this and talking about it. And there's going to be residual growth in the industry from this awareness and the demonstration of how these products can work with these small holdings farmers. And again, there's a lot of these farmers, kind of that 80-20 rule, but there are a lot of these farmers. CABI is the organization that comes to mind. So CABI, they are headquartered in Europe. They are a nonprofit that was established by the UN. There are 50 member companies that are a part of this agreement. And basically they facilitate these public and private partnerships between the small holdings farmers and industry. And so they've done a lot of great things. They have a deep understanding. Now, I'm talking here largely about sub-Saharan Africa, but every continent does have some growers like this. I'm sure there are some in Latin America, but CABI has a deep understanding of the cultural barriers and opportunities. So what is it that is going to help you to be successful with these folks? So there are companies, very forward-thinking companies, that have established manufacturing facilities in these areas, among these villages. Then the members of the village, the citizens of the village, they work at the production facility. The members of the village become the sales reps, and then the adoption rate and the knowledge and so forth of the products goes up dramatically when you take that kind of an approach. So there are success stories at the highest levels being talked about, the use of biologicals within this sector that contributes greatly to the long-term growth of our industry. CABI, good friends with the director there, and he talks about he wants economically sustainable solutions. So if someone comes and says, oh, I'm going to contribute $50 million for you to get biopesticides to these folks, he's not going to turn that check away, but he's much more interested in collaborative ideas like building a manufacturing facility in the community, getting the community involved in the demonstration trials, getting the community involved in the manufacturing, getting them involved in the sale. And there's some good examples of public and private partnerships. There's one I can think of in public health, where Merck gifted one of its compounds to the sub-Saharan African community for the control of river blindness. It was some great PR for them. The industry helped to distribute it, but the community took it in, and it's really a success story in public health if you want to look that up. CABI also has a bioprotection portal where you can go on and do a search for a biological that will meet a specific need, and that is supported by companies and also trade associations. So if you're interested in this, know that it's going to take significant resources from the senior leadership. So it's going to have to take a commitment with a long-term view. But there are, as I mentioned, distinct PR and brand benefits for a company that takes this road. So I mentioned Merck and abamectin, which is the compound. Merck still gets a lot of press, a lot of eyeballs. That was a legendary event in the public health community for this onchocerciasis intervention that they gave away for nothing. So I don't expect anyone on this call necessarily to take that road in the next couple of weeks, but think about it. Think about how you can connect with smallholdings farmers in your region, work out some program. It'll get you a lot of notice at higher levels. Let's talk about policy changes. I know I'm coming up on the end of my time here, but the most progressive, certainly from a policy change perspective, is Europe, where they have something called the Green Deal. They have it's a set of initiatives with the overarching aim of making Europe climate neutral. So they're using climate change as the platform for these changes. This involves greener industry, promoting green energy, eliminating pollution, etc. Coming from the Green Deal is the farm to fork strategy. So agriculture is central to the Green Deal. Farm to fork calls for sustainable production in food, but it sets aspirational targets for food production, 50% reduction of use and risk of chemical pesticides by 2030. Promoting and facilitating biologicals in the registration process. A minimum of 50% reduction of nutrient losses, getting 25% of EU under organic farming. So this is more aggressive, obviously, than anything we see in the States, anything we see in Latin America. It sounds really good. It's one of those sounds good on paper things, and I don't want to disparage this policy, but there are also some realities involved in this, and that takes me to my next slide, which is number 9, regulatory systems still create barriers in the biocontrol area. So it is imperative that regulatory agencies evolve and adapt their chemical-based registration processes if they want to help facilitate the adoption of biologicals. So just about every country, every administration is either concerned with or claims to have sustainability as one of its objectives, but using the biocontrol and biopesticide technology to achieve those objectives requires changes at the policy level. And these changes can be very slow coming. So here in the US, we've had this for quite a while. The US has a dedicated pathway for biologicals. Part of that is for the, pardon me, for the users, for the customers, but it's also a lot of the bio companies are located here. So they want to promote that adoption. So they make it easier, less expensive, without sacrificing the science or the risk assessments. Biologicals are inherently more safer. They're already found in nature. So they have a process to handle that. From what I know, from what we hear from our customers, and most of them are selling into Latin America, Central America, Chile are regarded as bio-friendly. Brazil, there are still some challenges relating to speed to market. Certainly a very important market. Everyone wants to be there, but it can take a little bit longer sometimes than what's advertised. However, as we look back to Europe, where we have this aggressive, progressive approach to promotion of biologicals, at the ground level, it doesn't necessarily play out that way. So we have also some individuals in the European regulatory or policy area that are disparaging perhaps microbials as not being safe for the food supply. When I looked at the stakeholder groups, I mean, we have stakeholder groups, and then there are also individuals, and individuals may have their own agenda. So I don't want to say any names, but people sometimes, we've all seen it in politics and technology and elsewhere. Sometimes people will create a problem that doesn't exist because it allows them to become the expert on the problem. And this is my opinion. In my view, this is what is happening in Europe. We have products like Bacillus products that have been in the market for 50 years, been used around the world with great success. They're the backbone basically of the biologicals industry. They've been proven safe. They've been looked at by every regulatory agency in the world, but some people are still creating a specter. And so in France, for example, the microbial aspect of biocontrols is microbials account for more than 50% of the sales in microbials everywhere else, and it's only about 10% in France because of some of these challenges that they're facing. So this is a considerable challenge, and for companies that are bringing in new technology to market, Europeans a very important market. They're a little bit leery about going there because they understand that they're going to be facing, what I would view some unrealistic or junk science challenges over there. So my last point, as I come to the end of my time, I'm going to get back to the stakeholder kind of thing. And this might not be a popular message with some of the folks on this call. It depends on where you are on the biocontrol spectrum. But here's a slide I like to use to talk about the evolution of production agriculture over time. So here's where we were 20 years ago, 25, 30 years ago. The further back you go, the more pronounced this chemical intensive area is. I've been involved in ag for 27 years now. I've been involved in some regard with biopesticides for 25 of those 27 years. So I've really seen this change here. So we have the organic industry again, which is at one end of the spectrum, and the organic industry is growing. There is a consumer demand that the organic industry is meeting, but this is kind of steady growth. We're not going to see any hockey stick. Well, I know you're probably not playing a lot of hockey. That's the analogy we use here for this kind of growth. We're not going to see the hockey stick growth in the organic market, This is the line that we're talking about here. And this is the evolution from a chemical intensive system to a system that is an integrated system using biopesticides and chemicals. This slope is never going to reverse. Not in my lifetime, not in your lifetime. It's never going to go back the other way, back to using chemical intensive production practice. So if you're here today, you're here because you're interested in this technology in this segment, and I'm glad to hear that. You're in the right place. If you're learning about it, you're considering what your options are, just think about that. This line is not going to go backwards. We're only going to get more and more and more integrated. And so that brings me to my final points. If we're going to grow this industry or be successful, we need to work together. So one of the things we talk about within BPIA and have always talked about is if this is not a mutually exclusive dynamic where it's one or the other. The large scale growth of our industry is predicated on using biologicals in an integrated system. So that means that each product has its own attributes, each category has its own attributes, and that's what we need to market. I talk to so many companies that are facing this dynamic. And so if you're an ag retailer and you want to grow your biologicals business, if you're a manufacturer who is acquiring a new or launching a new biologicals business segment, I want to tell you that you have to guard against people within your organization that came up through the chemical industry and are always going to think that biologicals don't have a place, think that they don't work, think that the chemicals are superior. In some way, chemicals have their attributes and biologicals have theirs. You have to guard against this thinking. You have to really address it within your organization because it will undermine your objectives. If you want to move in here, you have to work with your folks and you have to get their buy-in because they're the ones that are out on the ground. They're the ones that are out in the field and they need to take your message with them. So it's very important that you get your own people on board and help them to understand that last slide. This is the way that things are going. And we want to take advantage of that. On the other hand, and I've been involved in this industry for a long time, the biocontrol companies also have to guard against adopting this us against them mentality. It's not mutually exclusive. It's not us against them. It's us together. We both have our attributes. I get the blessing of getting to see American politics on a daily level and all of the finger pointing, why don't we market our products based on the attributes that they have instead of pointing at the competing segment and saying what they don't have or they don't do well? A grower really doesn't care. He's interested in his bottom line. And if you can help him to improve his bottom line, to make him more money, he's going, and that may be direct benefits like quality yield, all and so forth. It may be more indirect benefits where his buyers, the food companies, are looking for sustainably grown products, and you can help him achieve that by him demonstrating through some metrics or whatever. Both sides have to give a little bit here. So both conventionals and biologicals have their own set of attributes, and each can benefit from being used with the other in many, many systems. There is value to be gained from biologicals at all links in the food value chain. But you have to be thoughtful of the relationship between your link and the other links and what those attributes or benefits are to the other stakeholders if you want to maximize your investment and your return, your time investment in the biologicals industry. So Patricio, I apologize for taking a few extra minutes. I am very passionate, like to talk about this stuff. So thanks for your time, everybody.
Thank you, Rick. It's been great, illuminating, and no worries about time. We tend to prefer passion over accuracy.
The alternative, yeah.
Yeah. So that's great. Tenemos un par de preguntas. Would it be okay if I read them in Spanish? At least one.
I'll tell you, please do. And if I need some help, I'll ask for it.
Okay, so Fabiana Hernández de Mysore, Uruguay, pregunta sobre el manejo de resistencia. Y dice, ¿con el uso de biopesticidas se genera resistencia? ¿O el uso de estos productos biológicos al incorporar más herramientas reduce la probabilidad de resistencia?
I would say it's the latter. You have your escape population, Patricio. You have your susceptible population, and you have the population that is not susceptible. So for some genetic mutation, they have resistance to the pesticide, and we see many times how quickly that resistance population can grow as a proportion of the whole population. So what the biopesticide does is they have complex modes of action, and if the chemical doesn't get them, the biopesticide will get them. And so that's going to suppress this mutation, suppress that part of the population so that it doesn't develop. To the first part, and I've talked to researchers about this, there's no real evidence that you can bring chemicals back by using biopesticides. In other words, if a resistant population has developed in your field, can you switch to biologicals and bring back the efficacy of the chemical? There's no real data that shows that. I think some people talk about that being true, but I can't say that it's been proven.
Okay, espero que Fabiana lo haya entendido a través de la traducción. Lorena Dean asked in English, she said, "Hi Rick, in what part of the supply chain you see the role of third-party labs to support the quality assurance requirements from the industry?"
Oh, that's a good question. I know, well, quality assurance is important. Your supplier should be demonstrating to you that they're having testing done. I always encourage companies to have their own testing done. If you're looking for bioburden, or you want to know, is this really a biological or is it spiked? I mean, there's only one way for you to know that, and that's for you to use labs to help you in your acquisition of knowledge. It's also important in the link between the grower and the food company. Labs can help to determine residue levels. They can help to determine what products are being used. There's nothing worse for a grower than having a load of product rejected at the at port or at the point of sale, and they lose their entire investment because of a false positive. So this is one of the issues in Europe that we're seeing, where raising the specter of challenges with bacillus, and there can be false positives for a pathogen because of false positives that are recognizing use of BT, which is used right at the near harvest. So it's important for labs also, if that's the nature of your question, it's important for labs to work to ensure that the information they're providing is accurate and understand what are the needs of the stakeholder that they're serving.
Okay, we have many new questions now. La persona de apellido Moreno Velandia preguntó en inglés, what is your opinion about strategies to improve the quality of bioproducts? Concentration, purity, viability, shelf life. Who and how must do this?
That's another excellent question. I didn't talk about formulation science. One of the challenges for biopesticides is the shelf life, how long it lasts in the field. And so if you're a manufacturer, you need to either have a very talented formulation scientist or scientists on staff, or you need to work with a company that can provide those services. I know you mentioned some of my past career. I won't get back into that, but I worked for a major biological company for a long time. And I would say that a tremendous amount of the success of that company and its products related to the expert formulations. Formulation is going to make a product. So there are some limitations regarding biologicals that just can't be avoided. I mean, persistence. Again, biologicals don't last a long time, and that's what makes them environmentally friendly, because they don't persist, right? But it has to last for 2 years on the shelf. It has to be effective, or once it's out in the field, and whatever claims you're making, it needs to last. So, my advice is to make that a priority in your product development process. It's perhaps the most important thing. Once the discovery is done, you have to formulate your product based on the needs of your customers.
We have another very interesting question from Lady Wilches desde Ibagué, Colombia, de la empresa Carval Agrícola. Voy en español, Rick. Me queda una duda con los productos híbridos, ¿ok? Hybrids.
Okay.
Me queda una duda con la compatibilidad de la mezcla de moléculas químicas y biológicas. ¿Es viable? The examples that you've shown, are they viable? ¿Son viables?
Yeah, so those examples that the only reason they came to market is because they are viable. So if you are a seed, if you're a company that is a seed company, and you have expensive seed treatments, and you're going to add a biological, that biological cannot impede the value of the other compounds on that seed treatment. Similarly, if you have a biological, but the synthetic or conventional chemistry in the product is going to undermine the biological, it's not going to come to market, Patricio. So those products that I showed there, they've proven that they're viable. They wouldn't make it to market. You can look at the biological industry as a whole, and you see in the 90s, early 2000s, there were some efficiencies to be gained at the regulatory level. Natural products could make it to market more cheaply. And so we all know the snake oil, the snake oil. Well, snake oil, it might sell for one season, but over time, no one's going to buy it. If it doesn't work, no one's going to buy it. So we went through that period where there was a lacking in confidence, and the market sorts itself out. And so the products that didn't work, those products went away. The products that worked helped now to create this growth that we see. And same thing for those products back to the question. Those Pancho Votivo, I mean, the product from FMC is for corn rootworm. Those products are very, very successful, and they wouldn't be successful if they weren't viable. So, but it's important, that has to be at the beginning of your thinking, and that's why I mentioned compatibility is the issue.
Sobre esto mismo, ¿hay un pipeline de productos híbridos grande en el mercado? ¿Se vienen muchos productos híbridos? Is there a strong pipeline of hybrid products in the market already?
I can't say that, Patricio. I think that's why I mentioned it is an emerging market. But I think when you look at some of the agreements that are taking place, Corteva comes to mind. They have been a lot of activity. They've established their biologicals unit. They've had a lot of licensing acquisition agreements going on. So when you have companies like that are heavily vested on the conventional side, and they are becoming more vested on the biological side, it stands to reason that those kinds of products are going to emerge. I mean, the Pancho Votivo is a Bayer product, so they're bringing together their biological and conventional assets. So as we see that growth of the integrated systems, a natural outgrowth of that, I think, is going to be those combination or hybrid products. I cannot say that I know of a strong pipeline. I'd be interested to hear from you and any of the readers out there if you have questions or comments or please reach out. I'd like to hear from you, and I like to know what you're thinking as well as having you listen to what I'm thinking.
Ok. Última pregunta. La voy a leer en español, Rick. Buen día, soy Marcelo Persicini. Quisiera consultar si puede ampliar un poco más sobre las experiencias en bioherbicidas. ¿Cuáles son los microorganismos que se usan y para controlar qué malezas, weeds específicamente? ¿Tiene experiencia en soybean, en soya? ¿Qué productos hay en el mercado en soya? Muchas gracias.
I can't say that I'm an expert in this area, Patricio. My partner, Mark Trimmer, actually is a weed scientist, but he's a PhD, and he could speak very directly to this. So if you would, you could reach out to Mark at Dunham Trimmer or send a message to me. But again, I will say there's been a lot of work done. Marone Biosciences comes to mind here, where they've been working on bioherbicides for a while. We don't see the traction in the market because of the challenges that I mentioned, needing something that is broad spectrum, needing something that has residual. Growers want them. Certainly a grower wants those products, but unless you can deliver those benefits, the better alternative for the grower is the conventional herbicide, right? And so that's, again, the market is going to tell you how successful your products are in that. So I apologize that I can't answer that more specifically, Patricio, but I can help connect the dots there down the road.
Ok. Creo que estamos en el tiempo ya para empezar el break. Rick, I want to thank you. It's been great. There are a couple of questions that are left, and we ourselves have many other questions. So I think we'll interview you for the magazine maybe in the Times.
I would enjoy that, and I very much appreciate your time. Nice to be part of this presentation, and hope we can do it again sometime.
Y le quiero decir a la gente que revise todo lo que hace Dunham Trimmer, el report de feromonas, que es primera de la historia que lo sacan, debería ser un gran aporte, el que se va a venir de biofertilizantes también, y siempre publican sobre bioestimulantes y biocontrol. Creo que es una fuente de conocimiento de nivel mundial. Please send my regards to Mark, to Manel and all the guys there, and Bill Dunham. So, my pleasure.
Very well. I will do. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. Gracias. Inés, te cedo el control.